All right, here we go. We're here with South Coast Chronicles with Lisa Rayburn. Lisa, I'm glad to have you on. I think I've known you close to 30 years now.
Long time.
I came around in like 1992 or the end of 92 or the first of 93. I can never remember, but I think you were around when I started coming around the
Yes.
recovery community, correct?
Yes.
So here we are, this many years later.
Yes.
And I wanted to have you on because you're such an accomplished woman. You're an attorney. You have your doctorate in theology. You're sober, 16 years now?
Coming up on 15.
Coming up on 15.
Yes.
And you and I kind of have similar stories about having some time and going back out, and we'll talk more about that.
Great.
So I just wanted to kind of start out by asking you, sobriety, you got sober young the first time.
Yes.
So tell me about that, because I had a lot of the same experience.
Yeah, so I first got sober when I was 19 and needed to get sober at 19. So I had started drinking and doing drugs. It was the 80s, and I was just one of those people that crossed that line to addiction right at the beginning. As a kid, there wasn't like a long road that I was going to be on.
Yeah.
And had a lot of alcoholism in the extended family. By 19, I needed to get sober.
So what kind of family life did you have growing up? Like, was it full of alcoholics, or was it a pretty normal family life? Or
it was kind of in between, where my mom and dad really didn't drink because my dad's family did. And so my dad and my mom, they really understood alcoholism and addiction by seeing what had happened in my dad's family. Mm-hmm. So they raised us somewhat to not have alcohol around or drugs around. But I grew up in a place called the San Ynez Valley, which is up in Santa Barbara County.
Okay.
And it's all vineyards. It's like vineyards and horse ranches, and drinking is the hobby up there. So as a kid, we would just run around at the vineyards and be able to get any alcohol we wanted. And I had 2 older brothers, and they're the ones that got me to smoke pot and all this stuff. But I just went right over that line at the beginning and could always really get what I wanted. So
as a teenager, like the first time you drank, what was that like? Do you remember that happening? You remember that incident?
Yes. Well, I remember being 11. The first thing I did was smoke pot with my brothers.
Oh, you smoked pot before you drank?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we had like sangria in the fridge. There was always like a lot of socializing. And so I had sangria. I didn't even know sangria wasn't juice till I was like, 16, 17. But the first thing I did was smoke pot with my brothers. And I don't know if I even really got stoned, but we lived out in the country and they wanted some candy or something. So they let me take the car into town. No one was around. So I was like 11. I just smoked pot. I'm driving to the liquor store and just felt as though I had arrived.
Yeah.
But then it was shortly after that I started drinking. And I just felt like it was the missing piece. Mm-hmm. It just gave me solace and peace, and also allowed me to not care. I was cared a lot. I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin, felt really displaced even in, everywhere I went.
Yeah.
So it just gave me this solace right away. I loved it. And I thought I want to do this all the time.
Yeah, and I think for people that don't understand alcoholism, that's the common theme with all of us.
Yes.
And I can remember, the first or second time I drank, just feeling free and not feeling weird and not feeling like I didn't fit in, and all of a sudden I fit in. And
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it just went from there. It was just completely out of control. And then at 15, my dad was an executive at an aerospace company. And so he was always either in Los Angeles or Seattle. So he was gone a lot and would come home on the weekends. But at 15, my mom and I got in a really serious car accident. And my mom almost died in that accident. And she wanted to go spend more time with my mom and dad. And so, again, it's the 80s, so it was a different time.
Yeah.
But at 15, my mom kind of sat me down and said, okay, you can either move to Los Angeles or move to Seattle, or you can stay alone at our house up in the San Ynez Valley. And so I said, I'll stay alone.
Of course, at 15.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to this day, people always ask me, do you have abandonment issues from that? And I say, absolutely not at all.
Yeah.
Like, I loved it. I really wanted that. So they were gone all the time, left me the car, didn't even have my driver's license. And so I'm supposed to drive to school and back. But instead, I'm in LA. I'm like up north. I stopped going to school, kind of. I'd go to school. I always did kind of well in school. Didn't have to go too much, but.
So you always kept up with your schoolwork. And that kept the heat off, right?
Here's the thing. I did until 3 weeks before my high school graduation, where I had been told, look, you have all the absences you can have. You can't skip any more school. And so it was 3 weeks before high school graduation. And, of course, as we know, we're really good starters and poor finishers, So it's 3 weeks before graduation. Some friends were having a party. And I said, I'm out. Went to the party, never went back. So I ended up not graduating from high school.
Oh, wow.
And the principal had even said, if you had just come back, I would have let you graduate. But I didn't. And so it was just kind of this, I remember watching my high school graduation and drinking vodka and just thinking, how pathetic. And so about 2 or 3 months after that, I took the GED. So that's how I got my high school degree. So it was just a waste. I just could have finished, but I just couldn't.
Right.
And then ended up getting the GED after that.
Yeah. And then so got your GED, and then you're 18 at that time.
Yeah.
So you got sober a year after that. So talk to me about that year between getting your GED and what led you to finally getting sober at 19?
So at first, I started to see this doctor. It's kind of a long story with this guy too. So I started to see this doctor in Santa Barbara who, at the beginning, he was talking to me about getting sober. And I had a friend that got sober, and I didn't know anything about it. But this guy started to talk to me about it. And then we were kind of doing therapy, even though he was an MD. So I'm in therapy once a week, and he says, I want you to come in twice a week. And then he wanted me to come in 3 times a week. And during one of our sessions, I said to him, you know what, I think I like older men. And he goes, well, I'm an older man. And so he started engaging this relationship with me. And I knew, in fact, when I first got sober, I thought I had never prostituted myself or taken anything, But I realized, this guy had a prescription pad. And I thought, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
But it was I knew something was wrong. And I knew that this wasn't okay. And so a friend of mine went to the care unit up in Santa Barbara. And I was just completely dysfunctional. I couldn't, I had not, at that point gone to school. And I'm just kind of seeing this guy, and it was just awful. And so I went to the care unit, and that's when I got sober. That's when things began to turn around. I had a couple of relapses after that, but that's when I learned about recovery, and I learned about hope. And, I would listen to these speakers in 12-step meetings, and I just thought, wow. I remember hearing this man speak, and his story was completely different than mine. He had been like in gangs in the 40s and 50s, and he was older, and I heard him speak about alcoholism and about knowing what makes the big hurt go away. And I remember that moment listening to him and thinking, he's an alcoholic, and I understand exactly what he's talking about, how he drank and what he did.
Right.
And so I knew then that I was an alcoholic, and what that meant, and the freedom that can come with sobriety. So I didn't have any resistance really to getting sober. I didn't know it was hard. I had a couple relapses because I didn't really get it, and I was kind of so young. But I also loved what I saw from people in recovery. Yeah. So I've grown up in sobriety for the most part.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. And sitting in meetings as a young person.
Yes.
And now we're not young people anymore, but sitting in meetings as a young person, and you're the youngest person there, and it's like all these older people are in the room, and you got some arrogant guys sometimes saying, I've spilled more than you've ever drank.
Yes.
And then you have some people like the guy you were talking about, where you're like, I have nothing in common with this guy on the outside, but on the inside, we drink and feel the same.
Exactly.
Alcohol does the same thing to both of us.
Yes.
And I think that was a big thing for me.
Yeah.
So you started getting sober at 19. At
Yeah.
19 you finally stick, or did you turn 20?
Yeah, it finally really took at 21. I had one kind of small relapse. I was with some friends, but at 21, 19 to 21, I was mainly sober. And then at 21 was my sobriety date for 16 years.
Okay. So you got sober at 21.
Yeah.
And then tell me about your journey, your first couple of years, what you decided to do, how you started on your path to what you're doing now. And
Yeah, so Santa Barbara AA. So my sobriety date was in 1989, and especially that time up in Santa Barbara and in sobriety and recovery, I'm really grateful for that place and that period of time, because we went through the program of recovery, and we weren't told, you're sick, you're broken, you're damaged, it was the opposite. It was that, look, there's a problem. Change has to happen. And with that change comes total freedom and a whole new way of living, and a really beautiful, beautiful life.
Right.
And so I understood that. It was like, wow, okay, I do this work, I change, and life is good. That yes, we're different when it comes to drugs and alcohol. What we seek is different, but we are just like everybody else. Everybody has something. Our thing just happens to be alcohol and drugs. So got sober, had an amazing sponsor that really, shortly after I was sober, she said, we go out and live, so then you go out and live. What are you going to do with your life? And so I wanted to go to school and get my degree, and I'd always wanted to go to law school. I'd actually wanted to do one of two things. I either wanted to be a minister, or I wanted to go to law school.
Yeah.
And so, for a very long story, at that time I decided to become an attorney. And so I went and I got my bachelor's degree, and then I got my law degree, and started practicing law, and I met somebody, had an amazing life and relationships and sobriety, and moved from Santa Barbara down to Orange County, and things were really, really good for a long time, about 15, 16 years.
Got it. So you went to law school. What kind of law did you practice right when you got it?
Well, when I first got out of school, I was recruited at a large national firm, and so I thought I wanted to go into environmental law, but I was recruited from this law firm and did class action. So we did antitrust, class action, business. So I became a trial attorney, and was a trial attorney for really about 20 years. I still I do corporate law now, but was a trial lawyer in business and antitrust and class action.
So you got into that. You moved to Orange County, right?
Yeah.
Had 15 years of sobriety.
Yes, 15, 16.
And during that time, I think that's when I met you, is when you moved to Orange County. What year was that?
Yes, so that would have been like 91.
Yeah.
I think we moved in 91
to Orange
County.
I came around 92, 93.
Maybe 92. Yeah, around there.
Yeah, and met you at the Newport Club.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's good.
Yeah.
And so through your journey of that 15 years of sobriety, it was great.
Great.
Life was good.
Yes. I loved Alcoholics Anonymous. Loved sobriety.
Right.
Loved, being sober. And moving was a little odd for me. I'm kind of moving from my home, which is interesting because now Orange County is my home.
Right.
But at first it was just kind of strange to be in a new area and around new people. And I got kind of real external success in my career in particular. All the bells and whistles, became a named partner of a great law firm, and had a lot of material success and personal success. And about 14 or 15 years sober, I started to kind of pull away a little bit, and especially in law, like there's a lot of people drinking, and I had a whole separate group of friends that they were normies,
Yeah.
you know, really successful people that could drink and go to France and Napa and do all these things. And I thought, well, I want to go to France and Napa. And I had also kind of started seeing someone, and he drank, and he was a fine wine drinker. And I thought, well, maybe I was young. So I
Right.
started to get this thought of, maybe I was just young, and maybe now long-term sobriety has cured me of alcoholism.
Yeah.
And talked to all my normie friends, not my friends in sobriety.
Sure.
And probably the most important drink I ever took was when I had 16 years sober, and we had just, my entire law firm, we had taken a new attorney to get sworn in at the courthouse. And so the whole firm was at Las Brisas. And mind you, at the time, I'm managing partner of this firm and the boss to everybody. And so the whole group is there. And my office administrator, here's another big mistake. I had ordered a virgin margarita.
Yeah.
So I was playing with it, and my office manager had ordered a regular margarita, and she said to me, she goes, God, this thing's strong. And I go, is it? And she's like, yeah. And she goes, do you want to switch with me? And there was a brief moment, and then I just said, yeah, I do. And I took that sip, and at first I got nervous, thought, oh my God, I just drank. And then took that second sip, and it was the kaboom. It was the why have I not been drinking for 16 years? And that fast.
Right.
So between all of this thought of I'm going to drink fine wine, I'd never had a Cosmo, I'm going to go and Gulfstream and have a Cosmo. And I went back to my office after the thing, sat in my office, and I thought, I haven't had Absolute in 16 years.
Yeah.
Just like that. So a couple hours later, I left, went home, and immediately went to vodka.
By yourself.
Like, by myself.
Yeah.
Like that fast.
Yeah.
And so thankfully, I had two amazing
Yeah.
people in sobriety that surrounded me and pulled me back quickly.
It's so funny. I have such a similar experience. I got sober at 22 and stayed sober till I was 30, so it's 8.5 years sober. I was out on a date with a girl I barely knew. It's like a second date.
Yes.
We were at the Improv, and I had been having the same thoughts. Maybe it was a phase. Maybe I was young. I knew a lot of guys, from, my earlier years that drank heavy and kind of seemed to have got it there. I don't know their inside lives enough, but and I'd been thinking about it for a while, and I wasn't planning on drinking that night. And I went to the Improv, and back then they had like a 2-drink minimum, and they brought these big giant beers out. And I can remember being nervous, just like you said,
Yes.
taking that drink
Yeah.
and going, oh my gosh, what did I just do? And then as soon as I'm start my second beer and I feel it,
Yeah.
I remember like it was yesterday, the thought was, wow, this is awesome. It gave me that sense of ease and comfort.
Yes.
Why have I not been doing this?
Yes.
And, 4.5 years later, I'd burn it to the ground, and that's a whole nother story. But yeah.
Exactly. It happens just like
Right.
that. And then I had said too, if I ever drink again, I will never drink and drive. So I will not drink and drive. That day I drank and drove home.
Right.
The next morning I went to the liquor store on my way to the office. At the following day, 11 o'clock in the morning, I had all these associates working for me. And there were two guys in particular that were my good friends today too. And I went to their offices and I said, let's go have an early lunch. It's 11 o'clock. And so we go down to this restaurant, and I just start pounding shots, and with these people that work for me.
Yeah.
Hired the bartender, this girl that was there, Amelia. I'll never forget it, because this was 15 years ago now. And I said, come work with me. I need you to take care of me, and here are these people.
Right.
So they were Now, these guys were like, wow, it's cool to see her like this, because they only knew me sober.
Right.
So, but here's the thing. Internally,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, that darkness that had been with me at 19 returned.
Right.
Where I was like, I don't want to live. I was really depressed. Like that fast it wasn't a party. Never made it to Gulfstream. Still have never had a Cosmo.
Yeah.
Like I just
Right.
never, everything that I thought it would be. And when they talk about the progression, it's real.
Right.
And so now, and I knew when I was young too, but not like I know now. So when
Right.
they say powerless, it's truly
It's
powerless.
real.
It is real. And when they say it's a daily reprieve, it's a daily reprieve.
Yeah. And not only are we powerless, when we start back, we pick up
Right where we
back
left
where
off.
we left off. Because the same with me. I'm not going to do drugs.
Yes.
I went to that girl's apartment, smoked a joint. Okay, I'm not going to do hard drugs.
Yes.
Right? 4 days later, I'm in Vegas at a convention, and I'm doing all the other stuff.
Yes.
You know?
Yep.
I'm not going to do it with the kids in the house. I'm not going to, like, all
Yep.
these lines we put in front of ourselves, and then we cross. And
Yeah.
it's,
Because we can't not cross them.
right.
Like we think we have some semblance of control,
Yeah.
but we have none.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing, and for people in recovery, because there's a big second part to addiction and alcoholism. The first part is that admission, okay, I'm powerless over alcohol and drugs, and then surrendering to that, going,
Yeah.
okay, there's nothing I can ever do about that. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter, no matter if success or who I'm with or young or old or whatever, that's never going to change. But then the second part of alcoholism and addiction is the mental part that is always seeking to drive us back to that.
Right.
And that mental part has to be treated on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And by something higher than ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we'll never be able to control it.
Yeah. So you went out, and then so you had a couple people rally around you.
Yeah, I had great people rally
Yeah.
around me that just said, I mean, the tear, crying, and we're
Right.
not going to watch you die of alcoholism.
'Cause
I was very loved.
I remember you sponsored a lot of women, and you had a lot of people
So,
under you at
absolutely.
that time. I mean, you to me back then were like, oh, that's
Exactly.
you know,
It would be no different
Yeah.
than if I picked up a drink right now.
right.
It was like so people were devastated, and it really shook the foundation of a lot of people who had really relied on me.
Yeah.
And I felt it. Like I knew it. So it was no longer just me and my sobriety. This has a profound effect on the
Right.
people around me.
Yeah.
And so that's what really pulled me back
Right.
really quickly. I hadn't been out long enough to not care.
Yeah.
It was, and then frankly, I didn't know how I was gonna get back. I mean,
Right.
it was just one of those divine things
Right.
that happened again for me to get back and get sober again.
Right.
And now I'm coming up on 15 years again.
Yeah.
And I have no, now here's the other thing. I often hear people, say, well, I have no desire to drink again. And I always say, just because you have that doesn't mean you won't.
Right.
So like nowadays, yeah, I won't ever want to do that again. However, I also know what alcoholism and addiction is. So I am active to do everything for my sobriety daily. Nothing comes above it.
Yeah.
So hopefully that never happens.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to. So that's the thing too. People can get sober and stay sober the rest of their lives. And I
Yeah.
have tons of friends that
Sure.
have done that. So, but the last 15 years, I would have to say it's even different than
Yeah.
before, because the most important thing in my life is my sobriety.
Yeah.
Where before I was young. So the most important thing was success and a career and a relationship and,
Yeah.
and now the most important thing is
Yeah.
sobriety, hands down.
Yeah. We have to keep it first.
Have to keep it first.
And my relapse, in that 4 years, like probably wasn't a great thing that happened to me, but it became one of my biggest assets.
Yes.
When I got sober, because like you said, when I got sober young, it
Yeah.
really isn't first. We know we need it,
Right.
then we start questioning it,
Yes. Exactly.
and
yeah.
then you start getting around people that got sober in their 20s or their 30s, and it's like later 20s, early 30s, and then
Yep.
you see people. Yeah, it's, and then to say, I'll never want to drink again. I had a moment during the holidays last year, and I was just normal day walking through Target, the coffee's on this side, the liquor's on this side. It was going to get our coffee, and I saw Crown Royal, and all of a sudden I just got an urge.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, where did that come from? And it scared me,
Yes.
And that fear is healthy, but I know it's still there and it's still sleeping.
Which I think is a great reminder.
Mm-hmm.
So I had something that happened too. It was probably 4 or 5 months ago. And it was a friend's birthday. A lot of the same group because I have, extensive friends. And it was somewhat of the same group, but, and a lot of my friends drink. So I kind of have the drinking friends and then I have my non-drinking. But the drinking friends are normies, totally normal. But they, can drink pretty heavily.
Sure.
But it was a friend's birthday. So we're in the patio at Mozambique and they're friends with the owners. And so it was just this night and everybody's drinking, and didn't even think anything about it, but they're all drinking. And so there was a guy there. And so he said, so you don't drink? And he was kind of plowed at that point. I said, no. And he goes, so you never going to drink? And I go, well, no, I hope not. And he goes, yeah, but life's short. Are you sure you're not ever? And I go, I don't know. He goes, do you think it could be temporary? And I go, it could be temporary. And then when I left that night, I thought, no, it's not temporary.
Right.
And no, that's not how I'm going to respond. But I was kind of swept up in the moment of maybe it's temporary.
Yeah.
And so also, I am absolutely, I have a lot of friends, but my core people are sober.
Right.
I spend most of my time with my core people that are sober.
Right.
But when I have those moments, and just like what you're talking about, I think it's a really good thing because it's a reminder that alcoholism is alive and well. And so I think it's good to go, yeah, okay, no, I'm not like other people. And
Sure. Okay, to back up a little bit, so you relapsed, you got sober again.
Yeah.
You're new again. What did that look like? What did you change? What did you do?
Yeah.
Because that's tough coming back. Yeah.
And I will also tell you, I was spoke all the time in big deals. I had just 2 months before I drank, I was a Southern California Saturday night banquet speaker.
Wow.
Thousands of people I would speak.
Yeah.
And so when I came back, it was just the jarring. And, here's one thing to this day I don't think is accurate. A lot of times, it is accurate for some people. But people would say, when people drink, it's their egos that keep them out. Ego from coming back, okay? And I kind of get that. But it also really changed how I am to people now, because sometimes what keeps people out is the spiritual arrogance of those who remain. And so it was tough because there was a lot of love, but there was also an arrogance. And I remember talking to this lady that I had known for a long time. And I'd been back a couple days. And so I was talking to her the way I normally would, and she goes, do you have a sponsor? It was just so placating. And I could tell she wanted to sponsor me.
Right.
She wanted a feather in her hat,
Yeah.
And I just stayed away from that lady.
Yeah.
I'm like, no. So it was very hard coming back. I would also say in the last 15 years, everything has been repaired, in all the best ways. But now, too, I am very careful how I talk to people that are coming back. So I don't point them out. I don't say, welcome back. But what I do is I give them a hug and I say, do you need anything? And then I talk to them about normal stuff.
Yeah.
So that they can just have a minute of feeling comforted.
Yeah.
And that's what's changed, too, is that, but it was tough coming back.
I had the exact same experience.
Man, it's tough.
Some of the people were so welcoming and so warm. And some of them was just like, it's just kind of a arrogance. And then some of them were brutally honest with me. And, one of the people that you and I both know really well, this man told me in not so nice terms, just because I kept going back out. Like I kept trying and going back out. And it wasn't my ego. I wanted to be sober. I couldn't make a day stick. And He told me, just because you want to get sober, Chris, doesn't mean you get to get sober.
Right, yes.
And I went home that night
Yeah.
and got drunk,
Yeah.
but not real drunk. I had like 6 beers, and I smoked a little pot, and him saying that to me was just in my head.
Yeah.
And the next day was my sobriety date.
Yes.
You know?
And I think too, that same person it used to say to me, because people would say, I'm just so glad she's back, and I'm glad you're back. And he'd always go, she's not back.
Yeah.
Or he'd say to me, you're not back. And I got it. Because also, we have to have a psychic change to not go back. So that period of time that it takes to have that is where that kind of that discipline, taking those actions we don't want to, showing
Right.
up when we don't want to, surrounding ourselves with people so we
Yeah.
don't drink,
Right.
until that change happens again. And so that really was, so probably for, I don't know, 2.5, 3 years, it was like that. Of, not, because people that don't understand alcoholism and addiction, they think, well, welcome back. It's great you're back.
Right.
And it's like, oh no, I'm just on death's door here.
Yeah.
Like, a lot has to happen.
Yeah. I was angry. I was like
Yeah.
angry at the program, angry, and I just kept trying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you made it past those 2 or 3 years,
Yeah.
right? So, and then you're still working at the law firm, or you started
Yeah.
doing something else, or?
So eventually I left that firm, but I went to the law firm. And then actually after, kind of right away, which was kind of always strange in my life, but even more success happened right away, even at like 60 days sober back. It was just this, so a lot of success professionally, and started doing international work and the humanitarian work in World Food Supply. And so externally, the career got better and better still.
Right. Is that when you got in with the conscious capitalism
Yeah,
guys? Like,
yeah. So I started to work in social entrepreneurship and in business. A lot of my clients were all business people.
Right.
But I really started to get, here's another thing that really happened, was that God always meant, my whole life, I had this focus on God. But even coming back in these last 15 years, who I am just as a child of God, or who I am spiritually, became the most important thing.
Right.
It was that, so I really wanted to do things that served something higher and also served the world, not of the world, but serving the world. So I got into doing these world leadership. So, well, here's an interesting thing. When I had about 1.5 years sobriety, so there was still, I'm going to meetings, I'm sober, but I wanted to take some time off from litigation from my firm. And so all the attorneys had said, okay, let's just give her time, but she needs to stay.
Right.
So let's just give her a break, but we can't let her go.
Right.
So I took about a 6-month sabbatical. And during that sabbatical, I was reading a Vanity Fair article actually on World Food Supply. And the article was on the patent infringement lawsuits brought against farmers in the United States due to genetically modified seeds, that 80% of our farmers had been forced off their lands in the United States, and what was happening. So I'm at home, I'm reading this Vanity Fair thing, and here I was, an antitrust attorney. I was thinking, where are our antitrust laws? Where are our conflicts of interest laws? So during that sabbatical at home, I go to meetings and I come home, and I did a whole chart in my office at home of if I needed to solve world food supply, who would I need to help me? And I went to the top people in the world in business and philanthropy, and I listed all their names out. And I brought in an assistant, and I created a foundation called the Doctorate Foundation, and we started to contact these people, and I wanted to do a gathering up at this place called the Esalen Institute, and they all said yes.
Oh, wow.
It was like divine.
Yeah.
It was this, and these are players. And so I started to do this work from the legal perspective, but from the philanthropic perspective and,
Right.
and policy and that type of thing. So about 3 years, that's why at about 3 years sober, again, I left my firm.
Okay.
And then had the Detente Foundation.
Okay.
And then still practiced law.
Okay.
So I was doing all of that.
Right. So where have you gone? Where did that go? Like, tell me more about that.
I just dissolved the foundation
Okay.
last year. Kind of the last thing I did was go to a United Nations conference because I kind of got involved with running an international coalition on climate and agriculture. I led that for about a year, and so it was just last year that I dissolved that foundation and rolled all of my work into these larger foundations.
Okay.
Because I felt as though my work in that area was kind of complete, and that the most impact I could have was as an attorney.
Right.
So I thought, to finish out the rest of my career,
Right.
I wanted to expand my law firm again,
Yeah.
because I saw the impact that can come from law, the impact that comes from having that kind of power and influence, that I could even do more than
Yeah.
running the foundation.
Yeah.
So, but the rippling effect of all of that was great. But I worked with a lot of guys and I still do. I practice law, but then I work with executives and philanthropists and leadership executives on mentoring and coaching and that type of thing.
Love it. And then at what point did you decide to get your doctorate in theology?
Yes. So that was.
So here you are, an accomplished attorney.
Yes.
Right? You decided to get your doctorate in theology.
Yes.
When was that?
That was about 5 years ago.
Okay.
And I had always wanted to do it and kept thinking that I would, and then just kind of putting it off. And then
that was with Claremont University?
Claremont School of Theology.
Okay.
And so Claremont School of Theology had a new program that they put out. So it was 5 years ago. And the specific doctorate it's a Doctor of Ministry degree in spiritual renewal, contemplative practices, and strategic leadership. So the doctorate is as leaders, how do we hold ourselves spiritually? What kind of contemplative practices can we engage in? What is high level thinking in strategic leadership? So if we need leaders that are truly, truly serving our world, serving something higher, who do we need to be personally?
Right.
And I thought, I really wanted to do it. And I didn't think I would get accepted because everybody in the program had a Master's of Divinity except me. And then they went through my body of work that I had done for many years, and they said it was the equivalent. So they allowed me into this program for the doctorate. And the most amazing 3.5 years of my life. It was great.
So what's the big takeaway from that?
So, well, a couple of things. And what's really interesting, because a big focus of my doctorate is also on neurotheology, neuroscience, and neuroplasticity. So these neurological states of being that are just very, very real. Even with neuroplasticity, we can grow and advance despite age.
So for those that don't know, give me a bullet point definition of neuroplasticity.
So neuroplasticity is that our brains can continue to advance and grow, especially with certain contemplative practices. So say it's healing or well-being, or we want to learn something new. And when we engage in certain actions, contemplative practices, ways of being, it changes us neurologically.
Got it.
Which is really incredible because especially with aging, we think we're just kind of, the brain just begins to fade. And all this stuff. But neuroplasticity shows that it doesn't, that's not necessarily the case.
Right.
Neurotheology is really this science that has been done when people have profound spiritual experiences, their brains change.
Right.
They change. So in recovery, I used to think, I don't know how this works. So how does, getting out of yourself for people who go to meetings, for people who help others or get a commitment or and so I often used to say, we know how it works, we don't know why it works. But now that I've gotten this doctorate, I know why it works.
Right.
I know exactly why it works. when we take other actions, how and why our
Got
life
it.
changes, and then the full potential of that.
Got it.
So that's the doctor. So I work with people kind of individually on that stuff, and then as groups.
Right.
So my biggest thing is kind of leading groups through change.
Mm-hmm.
So I do a
That's
lot of
neat. That's neat. And so you are the attorney for South Coast Counseling.
Yes, I
right?
am. And I would have to say it's, and I have represented, and this is no exaggeration, I've represented hundreds and hundreds of people. But South Coast Counseling has always been beloved to me because who South Coast Counseling has been in the community for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
I have always thought so highly of and just had a warm place in my heart for.
Right.
So to be the attorney for South Coast Counseling means everything.
Yeah.
It's of my heart.
Right. And it's neat, and we're glad to have you. What are you like? What would you say makes South Coast Counseling so special?
I think the heart of it, that even the people and the history of South Coast in recovery, it's frightening to get sober. It can be overwhelming to get sober. There's a certain suffering that can happen when you're trying to get sober. And when you go into the warm embrace of a place like South Coast, who also has this history of helping people. And there's people I know that got sober through South Coast a long time ago.
Right.
They are sober, they are here, they have amazing, great lives. And then the leadership team.
Yeah.
I know that anybody that's going to South Coast is going to be in good care.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, and really important for people trying to get sober, that they go somewhere to get some help so
Yeah.
they can kind of have that buffer before they have to get out there into
Yeah.
that world. So that's what I think South Coast is,
Yeah.
and
Awesome.
think highly of it.
Yeah, we feel the same way. I get the privilege of working there and helping direct and run the place, but it has its own. It sounds kind of corny, but it's true. It has its own spirit when you walk in that
Yes.
house, and the Wednesday night alumni meeting, and people are coming back from the 80s and the 90s,
Yes.
and
Yes.
talking
And I
to the
know
that are
those
there.
people.
Right.
So it's not just hearing the stories.
Yeah.
It's, wow, no, I know these people and this is true.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just such a, in our world today, sometimes,
Yeah.
we don't know what's true. We
Yeah.
don't know where the safe place is.
Yeah.
We don't know. And so there's certain things when we do know, that's really special.
Yeah. So you and I kind of have a lot of similar interest in exercise and walk. You've run marathons. I'm not a marathon guy, but
Yep.
you and I got to talking one day, and I told you about a book I read by Colin. I think it's O'Brien.
O'Brady.
O'Brady. Colin O'Brady.
Yeah.
Right. And it's called the 12-Hour Walk. And I took a 12-hour walk. I started at noon from my house in Costa Mesa and walked to downtown Long Beach and finished at midnight and took an Uber home. And I told you about it, and I told you I thought I was going to tell all these people about it before I did it, and everybody was going to get on board and do it. And after I did it, I realized how hard it really was. And then I was like, I don't really have any friends that can do this. I told you about it. You were like, I'll do it. And so
Yes.
you did the 12-hour walk. So tell me about
Yes.
your experience with that.
I love that stuff too.
Yeah.
That's why when you told me about it, I was like, I'll totally do it. And
Right.
and I'll answer your question, but not to digress to digress for 1 second. I did run a bunch of marathons. In fact, I'm
Right.
trying to get back to run another one now. So
Right.
I've run like 6 marathons,
Yeah.
bunch of half marathons. And but during that whole training time, there's some great movies. One is about, what's it called? Running Across the Sierra. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the name of it.
Yeah.
But it's about these runners.
Right.
And they run across the Sierra Desert. And
Yeah.
it had never been done before. And you had an Olympic runner, you had a trained athlete, you had a guy that was sober, and then you had a couple other people. When they went on this thing, the pros were dropping out.
Right.
The guy that finished was the guy that was sober. And then, so these other guys, there was one part when they were running, and these guys said, it's going to be dangerous. What are we going to do? We don't have a plan to go over
Right.
this during one time. And it was the alcoholic that was like, doesn't matter what the plan is. Let's just go.
Yeah.
Let's go do this,
Right.
you know? So there's beauty with people who are also
Sure.
addicts and alcoholics,
Yeah.
because we can turn that energy on to
Yeah.
good. So anyway, anybody that, you know, really needs to, you know, kind of put their energy in it, there's these great things we could do. So I did the 12-hour walk.
Right.
It's like, of course, and I did it because I love doing that stuff personally.
Yeah.
And then because of my doctorate, working with people on contemplative practices.
Sure.
And so, and it was great for about 9 hours.
Right.
Like you said, like
Yeah.
it was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then those last 3 hours were brutal.
Right.
But I will tell you, there's something that during that walk, because I wasn't sure how much I learned. I think I even said to you, I'm the exact same person. I'm just tired,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah.
But what I realized when I was walking, my mom passed away a year ago, and my dad passed away about 10 years ago. And when I was doing that walk, I was thinking about them. And I said to God, kind of myself, but to God, I said, or it came to me, I understand them better because I understand myself better as I was walking.
Yeah.
Then I thought, I understand a lot of people because I understand myself.
Right.
And so that nugget of insight
Yeah.
stayed with me from that 12-hour walk
Yeah.
that I've really realized later of, wow, I really understand people because I understand myself. So
Yeah.
sometimes when we put ourselves out there on those extreme types of
Yeah.
things, we can learn a lot about ourselves.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I ever want to do that again,
I don't know. I mean, like you said,
but I want to run a marathon
the
again.
first 9 hours, I was like, this isn't that big
It's
a
great.
deal.
Right.
And those last 2 hours, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, the third of the last 3 started getting tough, but those last 2 hours
Brutal.
were brutal.
Yes.
And my really good friend Eddie Steele, who turned me onto this, he's like a specimen as far as physical fitness goes. He had the same experience. You know?
Yes.
But it was funny, something you just said, just like kind of put a lot of perspective on that walk about the guy in the Sahara, because that's the part of my mind I tapped into to finish, is that just
Yes.
stubborn, alcoholic,
Yep.
make it happen no matter what.
Yes.
There's no way I'm quitting.
And when you turn that on for something positive,
Right.
Because I had that too, because I started at 6:02 a.m.
Yeah.
I went through the whole I ended up on like a 12-hour hike.
Right. You
I
were
didn't
up and down
I was
hills,
up
right?
and down hills. But I was just trying to get to 6:02 p.m. So those last 10 minutes, I'm circling my car.
Right.
I was just walking around the park.
Right.
But I was not going to not finish.
Right.
Like no part of me wasn't going to
Sure.
finish. And so it's that when we can also learn, which is why I like doing things like that.
Yeah.
When we know that we could finish something we started, when we know that our word means something.
Yeah.
I told you I'm going to go do this. So that word means something nowadays.
Right.
And that we can accomplish. And that's the thing, despite our history, despite backgrounds, it did, you know, and I think it's so important, especially for people in recovery, put aside we're broken, we're different, put into action these incredible traits
Right.
that we have.
Right.
And then see what you can accomplish,
Yeah.
because the sky's the limit
Right.
with what we can accomplish, whatever people want to
The
do.
most resourceful people in the world are addicts and alcoholics.
Absolutely. If
Right.
I'm stuck somewhere and I need help, it's the alcoholics, because they're going to make
Yeah.
it happen.
Yeah.
They're going to come get me. They're going to find me. They're going to
They'll
fix
figure it out,
They'll
right?
Figure
we
it
figure
out.
things out.
We figure it
So,
out.
Yeah. So in closing, I just want to ask, just a general question. What would you say to somebody that's struggling with alcoholism, struggling with addiction, especially, a young woman or the women in
Yeah.
the community? What would your message be to them?
I would say find some people who can help you, that don't think you can do it alone, because you just can't. It's impossible to do it alone. And so find some people that can be there, that can help you, and then take the direction from what they're saying.
Yeah.
And then just know, we admit we're powerless, that we need help. That's just the beginning, because then power comes in.
Right.
Like the help comes in, but especially those first few years, the help has to come in from outside of ourselves, and it has to come from other people.
Sure.
So just don't think you have to do it alone. You can't do it alone. Don't think you have to. And then, set down the weight of it and let people help you and carry you along. And really the thing of, it seems trite, but it's true, let other people love you till you can love yourself.
Right.
Just be surrounded. And then just put aside, with my sponsees, we just finished a book called Drop the Rock.
Yeah.
And Sandy Beach, who was a great speaker in recovery, just amazing. But he talks about, he was holding on to this rock of his own thought, of what he thought he needed to do and needed to be. And so he's holding on the rock and he's drowning. And here are these people in a lifeboat saying, just drop the rock and get in the lifeboat. But he's holding on to the rock thinking, this is all I have. I got to figure it out. This is my stuff. Who am I without this? And then the beauty is, finally, drop the rock, get into the lifeboat,
Right.
and then just be carried for a while till you start feeling better.
I love it. Well, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
So fun.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.